Really, submission in faith is where the rubber hits the road in terms of holiness. When you truly bow under God submissively, that's the essence of holiness. And Jesus himself is the best example of that, isn't he? When he cried out in the garden, "If it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done." And so I want to look at that theme with you this morning of living submissively by faith. A few weeks ago, I got an email from a young man. He's an entrepreneurial young businessman, and he had an interview that day with the most beautiful possible prospect that he had ever received. And if he got this business connection, his whole business would take a huge step forward. And I knew about it, and we prayed about it together and how God would guide him. And just before he went to the interview, he sent me this email. "I'll praise God if I get it. I'll praise God if I don't get it." And I thought to myself, that young man is a step ahead of me many times. Well, let's turn to 2 Kings 4, and we want to pick up at verse 18. You recall this is the history of the Shunammite woman and her son received by promise through the prophet Elisha. And we pick up where this son is growing and he goes out to the field. Verse 18, "And when the child was grown, it fell on a day that he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said unto his father, my head, my head. And he said to a lad, Carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon, and then died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and shut the door upon him, and went out. And she called unto her husband, and said, Send me, I pray thee, one of the young men and one of the asses, that I may run to the man of God, and come again. And he said, Wherefore wilt thou go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, It shall be well. Then she saddled an ass, and said to her servant, Drive and go forward. Slack not thy riding for me, except I bid thee. So she went, and came unto the man of God to Mount Carmel. And it came to pass, when the man of God saw her afar off, that he said to Gehazi his servant, Behold, yonder is that Shunammite. Run now, I pray thee, to meet her, and say unto her, Is it well with thee? Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, It is well. And when she came to the man of God to the hill, she caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to thrust her away. And the man of God said, Let her alone, for her soul is vexed within her, and the Lord hath hid it from me, and hath not told me. Then she said, Did I desire a son of my Lord? Did I not say, Do not deceive me? Then he said to Gehazi, Gird up thy loins, and take my staff in thy hand, and go thy way. If thou meet any man, salute him not, and if any salute thee, answer him not again, and lay my staff upon the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And he arose and followed her. And Gehazi passed on before them, and laid the staff upon the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Wherefore he went again to meet him, and told him, saying, The child is not awaked. And when Elisha was come into the house, behold, the child was dead, and laid upon his bed. He went in therefore, and shut the door upon them twain, and prayed unto the Lord. And he went up and lay upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands, and he stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. Then he returned and walked in the house to and fro, and went up and stretched himself upon him. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, Call this Shunammite. So he called her, and when she was come in unto him, he said, Take up thy son. Then she went in and fell at his feet, and bowed herself to the ground, and took up her son, and went out. Well, with God's help, I want to look at 3 things with you. I want to look at submissive faith as the essence of holiness in terms of the future, in terms of the past, and in terms of the present. Well, we go in our thoughts this morning, or this noon, to a little city named Shunem, some 15 miles from Mount Carmel. Today, that little village is called Solem. It still exists, a little tiny village. I've been there myself on one occasion and saw the archaeological digs of the original city of Shunem that was right next door to present Solem. And not much you can see there today, except it is impressive to see in the distance Mount Carmel, 15 miles away. And so you can picture Elisha going to his little seminary at Mount Carmel time and time again and traveling through that area, stopping by Shunem to stay with this God-fearing couple, particularly this great woman, as the Bible calls her, a woman of some prominence, no doubt spiritually, perhaps also materially. And a bond is established between this couple and Elisha. And she persuades her husband to build a separate little room on the house. And regularly, Elisha comes to visit her, to visit them as he's passing through. Now, out of gratitude, Elisha then comes to this woman through his servant Gehazi. That was the cultural norm to do it that way in those days, to ask, is there a favor that I can do for you for what you have done for me? And she answers remarkably this way, I dwell among my own people. In other words, I'm content with what I have, Elisha. Now, think about that a moment. If there's a prophet of God who had miraculous powers at God's bidding, and he came to you today and said, I'll give you whatever you want, would you say, I just dwell among my own people. I'm entirely content and submissive with where I'm at. So really, I've got nothing to request. Now that answer is all the more remarkable when you consider that this woman didn't have any children. And to be childless in times of Israel was to be under the curse of God. Because an Israelitish woman saw childlessness as a sign of God's disfavor. Because secretly every Israelitish woman hoped that somehow through her loins the Messiah would descend. And so this woman already, even before we get to our text this morning, indicates by her whole way of life a kind of submission to the providence of God. She's obviously come to terms with this childlessness and accepted it and embraced the pain and submitted to God. But Gehazi the servant tells Elisha, you know she has no children. And then God reveals to Elisha, which he then conveys to the woman, that about this time, 1 year from now, she would embrace a son. And it happens. And the boy grows up as the son of promise, the son of joy, and one day goes out to the field, gets some kind of sunstroke perhaps. His head begins to hurt. His dad doesn't think much of it, says to a servant, take the boy home to his mother. And he goes home to his mother and sits on her knees until noon. And then the Bible, with its characteristic simplicity, says, and died. Died. The son of promise. The son given by the prophet. The son whom she hoped through him might come the Messiah one day. What a tragedy. What a trial. My only son. My only child. What to make of it? What to do with it? Well, what did she do? Well, the Bible says something remarkable. She laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut the door upon him, and went out. All three of these actions are actions of faith. She laid him on the bed of the man of God. She would not pollute that room. Anything that came into contact with the dead in Bible times was considered unclean. She believed, you see, by that very act, that the God of Elisha could raise her son from the dead. And she shut the door upon him. That was an act of faith as well, because you see, in those days, in that hot climate, you had to bury someone the very same day that they passed away. In fact, as soon as they passed away, you made preparations for burial. And she shut the door upon her dead son. What if someone would find him? She'd look like a very bad mother, deserting a dead boy. She shut the door upon him, believing that God would raise him from the dead. And then she went out. She went out by faith to find Elisha, the God of Elisha, who could help her in her extremity. But faith always faces obstacles. And the first obstacle she faced was Elisha wasn't around. He was 15 miles away, and it wasn't common for a woman to travel that far, particularly not without her husband. And yet faith is enormously inventive. Faith is enormously energetic. She sends a messenger to her husband, "Send me a donkey, and I want to go to the man of God." And he responds, "Well, why are you going today? It's neither new moon or set. There's nothing special going on." And she, of course, doesn't tell him about their son dying. That too is an act of faith. She doesn't want to disturb him. She doesn't want to draw attention. She doesn't want to be kept from going to Elisha. You see, faith knows ultimately no obstacles. She must go. True submission does not mean that you don't act. True submission is active. She responds to her husband with this remarkable word, shalom, peace, future tense. It shall be well. Why are you going to the man of God today? One word answer, shalom. Imagine her husband getting that answer in the field. By the way, sir, your wife just has a message for you to answer your question. Why she's going to the man of God 15 miles away on her own. The answer, sir, is shalom. It shall be well. And of course, he knew she was a woman of faith, and no doubt he took it up that way. And it doesn't appear that he interfered, and she left with a servant, with this God-centered expectation for the future. How do you view the future? Often we have fears. Those fears multiply. When we don't take them to the Lord, they multiply some more exponentially. And we can become full of fear. But you see, the essence of holiness is to take that future and lay that future in the lap of the Lord and say, shalom, all things shall be well. My God, my Father shall take care of me. That's a wonderful way to live. Peace. The future shall be peace. Now, of course, if we're unsaved, if we're not believers, it shall not be well. And this does not apply, of course, because then we're looking to other things and other people to help us and to build our future on things that are not God, and that's a disaster. But this woman has God in view. And so she goes to the prophet knowing that the prophet is anointed of God to do the works of God. She tells her servant, drive and go forward, slack not thy riding for me, except I bid thee. So she went and came to the man of God to Mount Carmel. I love those simple words, don't you? So she went. So much is packed into those 3 words. She went with all these doubts and fears. Well, yes, but it was shalom. She went with faith and hope and expectation. And yet she's urgent. Slack not thy riding. Go quickly. Time is of the essence. 6 hours, 5 hours to get there, 5 or 6 back. Don't want anyone to find my boy dead. We've got work to do. We've got a place to go. She acts by faith. Elisha sees her coming from a distance. He sends Gehazi to her with the words of the essence of this passage, the highlight of this story. Run now, I pray thee, to meet her and say to her, is it well with thee? Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with the child? He recognizes, you see, something's unusual. This is not typical. This woman is coming to him all the way to Mount Carmel. Something must be wrong. Is it well? And she answers, Shalom. Shalom. It is well. Everything that's happened to this moment is well. How can she say that? With her son dead at home. Now, people ask us, of course, repeatedly, don't they? How are you doing? And you say, well, I'm well. And sometimes you say, I'm well, when you're really not that well. Because, well, you don't want to pour out all your problems and troubles to people. And it's just almost a formal way of greeting. Are you well? Yes, I'm well. But we don't think much about it. It comes lightly and automatically to our lips. But to say it is well, when your son is dead at home, the son of promise, the son through whom you thought the Messiah would come, that is amazing spiritual submission. And that is really what true submission is all about. Learning to say it as well, regardless of the circumstances around me. That is the grace of God. So let's take a look at this a moment. What really are the steps of such submission when we live a holy life and learn to trust our Father's hand, our Father's heart, our Father's eye, our Father's will, our Father's love as adopted children? What steps do we go through when things seem to go against us to really bow under God? I want to give you 4. The first is this. Acknowledge the Lord. When trial strikes you, tragedy penetrates your life, the first thing to say is, it is the Lord. So often people don't do that, do they? Even Christians don't do that. So, well, Mother Nature must have done this. Or fate did it. No. There is no comfort in anything that is tragic if you can't begin with this. The psalmist said, I was dumb with silence. I opened not my mouth because thou didst it. We heard yesterday about Shimei. Let Shimei curse, for the Lord hath bidden him to curse David. It is the Lord. That's where submission begins. You know, when 9/11 happened, some 11 years ago in America, then there was a team of people that came on to a TV show where Larry King was interviewing him, a variety of ministers, and Larry King asked them, where was God in all of this? And several of the ministers said, God had nothing to do with this. God would hate this. God would abhor this. But one minister said, God has everything to do with this. Everything to do with this. Because if God has nothing to do with this, then we have an impotent God. Because then the forces of evil are stronger than the force of God. And you see, that's how we experience it also in our soul. When we bow under God, We come to God knowing, as we heard yesterday, that God is the first cause, the ultimate cause. As Calvin said, the primary cause must always be in our eye, and the secondary cause, or causes, must be trivial to us. So you begin in submission by saying, it is the Lord. Secondly, justify God. Don't only say it is the Lord, but say it is right. It is right what God has done. When Eli heard that God took away his 2 sons, he said, it is the Lord, let him do what seemeth him good. He was saying, it's right. My sons were sinners. They didn't deserve to live. It's hard on me, yes, but it is right. It is just. And David's throne was taken over by his own son. Here's how he responded. Behold, here am I. Let the Lord do to me as seemeth good unto him. So when this woman says it is well, she's saying in the first place, it's the Lord who's spoken, but also it's right. I really don't deserve a son to begin with. Now here's a problem. By nature, we always think we are right. And therefore, when tragedy strikes us, we feel sorry for ourselves, naturally, and we can't understand why God would do such a thing to us. Because deep down, we think we deserve much better. Oh, we can be in conservative churches, we can subscribe to various confessions, we believe in the total depravity of man, but when someone touches us, we don't act like we believe in the total depravity of man and that we deserve nothing because of our sin. When I was a boy, I often came to my mother about different things, of course, like every child would, and I would try to feel sorry for myself now and then, but my mother always had this saying. It was always, could be worse. And after a while, it got frustrating. I was 9 years old one time, and I said to her, I just blurted out. It wasn't very nice, but I blurted out. I said, Mother, you could always say it could be worse. I mean, in other words, it doesn't help me. And she said, well, it could be worse. I said, but Mother, I'm upset about this. She said, son, you have to learn in whatsoever state you are in, therewith to be content. I never forgot that answer. And then she said this, remember, we only deserve death and hell. It could be much worse. The worst tragedy God has ever brought into your life is far less than what you deserve in your very best moments. To accept that is to justify God for all his actions. Like the thief on the cross, this man hath done nothing amiss, but we receive the due reward of our deeds. God is righteous in all his ways and just in all his works. But this woman goes yet deeper. A third step of submission is not only to say it is the Lord and it is right, but it is well. That is to approve the Lord, even in actions in which he seems to come against me. That's the point that Job reached when he said, blessed be the Lord, the name of the Lord. Lord's given, the Lord is taken away, the Lord is righteous. But then he adds to it, blessed be the name of the Lord. It is well. I don't know about you, but I'm not there very often. Certainly not anywhere near the amount I should be for how long I've been on the way. But to actually take our greatest trials and say, Lord, this is well, this is my Father's hand, and whatever my Father does is absolutely best for me. Therefore, it's well, and I trust thy will more than I trust my own, and really turn the reins of your life over into God's hand. That's holiness. Not my will, but thine be done, O Lord. Take my hands, take my heart, take my life, and consecrate it, let them be. I won't choose my own way, even if I could. That's the heartbeat of holiness. It is well. That is amening the ways of the Lord with the deepest submission and the deepest distress. Is it well with your husband? Is it well with you? Yes, yes. Is it well with the child? It is well. It's grace. Submissive grace. Submissive faith. And yet there's one more step to true submission, I believe. And that is not only to say it is the Lord and it is right and it is well, but then to cleave to Him. To cleave to Him in the midst of the greatest trial. As my greatest friend when he seems to come against me as my greatest enemy. To kiss the rod that smites me. To hang to the hand that whips me. To bring back the stone that is thrown at me. Out of pure love for God and His glory and submission to His will. I was actually in London some years ago and sitting in a park before I had to speak somewhere and meditating on my message. And a young woman walked into the park with a dog. And I'd never seen one of these contraptions. Maybe they're common here, but she had a contraption in her hand with a ball at the end. It looked like a pretty hard ball. But she, with a flick of her wrist, she just whipped that thing around at the dog. And that ball went out and hit the dog. And I thought, that dog's going to be angry. But the dog just picked up the ball, ran to her, and she hugged the dog. And the dog was like all over her. It was all love. And then she did the same thing again. Whipped that ball, hit the dog, and picked it up, brought it back. And I was thinking, that's exactly what true submission is. God strikes us, and we bring it right back to Him. And we trust Him, and we receive His embraces. And we learn more, you see, from the rod that strikes us than from the staff that embraces us. You learn things. You learn about submission in affliction that you don't learn when you're in the midst of prosperity. It's here that you learn to say with Job, though he slay me, yet will I trust in Him. And that is the heartbeat of holiness. That is the Holy Spirit's work in us in a major way. And yet this woman, after she says it as well, she goes on and clings to the prophet's feet. And that confuses some people. You see, some people say, well, if you're really submissive, then she would have just not gone to the prophet in the first place. She just would have accepted it and done nothing. That's not true. True submission is not equated with inactivity. There's three things you notice here. First, submission is not a taking away of the sense or feeling of affliction. She's still troubled. Her soul is vexed within her, Elisha says. She clings to the prophet. Did I desire a son of my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me? Now here's the point. You can be deeply vexed with a trial, even as you are deeply submissive to the Lord who gives it to you. In fact, I'd turn it around and say this. If you are not grieved by the affliction, whatever you're experiencing, you're not being submissive. If there's no pain, there's nothing to submit to. There's a woman in my congregation, I mentioned this the other day, I believe, she's passed away now, but when her husband passed away, she came to me 2 years after he passed away. She said, the Lord has given me so much submission that I really never missed Him. I'm thinking, something's not right. That's not submission. That's relief. Real submission feels pain, but it bows under God. It surrenders all to His authority. That's what you see in this woman. She bows. She says it as well. She means it from the bottom of her heart. And yet she wants to know why. She wants to understand. She's troubled by it. And that's the second thing that most people get wrong. They think that if you're really submissive, you don't ask the Lord why something is happening. They think it's sinful to ask why. Of course it's sinful to ask why with a clenched fist. Why are you doing this to me? But it's not sinful to ask why in the spirit of Psalm 139. Search me, O God, and know my heart, and try me, and know that I may know my thoughts, and show me if there's any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Why, Lord? You see, if it's done in the right way, it's not sinful. If it was always sinful, then Jesus would have sinned. Blasphemous thought, but Jesus would have sinned when he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? So we may ask why, but only ask why in submission. Only ask why with tears. Only ask why as you bow. Show me, teach me, uncover me, lead me. And the third thing about submission here is you notice how this woman doesn't stop. She keeps using the means. Submission uses the means. Elisha says, oh, Gehazi, take my staff now and go ahead of me and put it upon the face of the child. And the woman says, as the Lord liveth and my soul liveth, I will not leave thee. I don't want your staff, Elisha. I want you, because you are God's prophet. So she perseveres. True submission perseveres. And so this woman is submissive to the future. She's submissive to the past. And I want to conclude now by just examining ourselves and say, are you submissive now in the present? You know, this woman got her son back, of course. We know this happy ending to the story. That's very well. She said shalom, future tense. Then she said shalom, past tense. And then the Lord made it well, present tense. Verse 37, she went in and fell at his feet and bowed herself to the ground and took up her son and went out. Same words. She went out. She was still living by faith, you see. But now the Lord made everything well, and that's a wonderful, happy ending. And that will be a picture of the happy ending of God's people forever. Every one of God's children will have a very happy ending. It shall be well for eternity. But right now, with whatever set of trials you have going on in your life, is it well with you? Are you being submissive to God? Do you really say it is the Lord, it is right, it is well? Are you cleaving to God in the midst of trial? Providential trial. But also in terms of redemptive trials. In terms of your soul, are you clinging to God for your spiritual needs as well? Are you bowing under God with everything, trusting Him, casting your care upon Him, spiritually, physically, emotionally? What about your spouse, your husband, your wife? Is it well with your spouse? Is it well with your children? Is it well with your parents? Are you speaking to them as the Lord enables? Are you modeling for them the way of submission? See if it's well with our soul. If it's well in submission to God. We want to live a holy life. We want to model the holiness of God and of Christ. We want the work of the Holy Spirit to be evident in our lives, that others can see that we have been saved, that we know what it means to cast our cares and burdens upon the Lord and not take them right back again, but truly leave them with the Lord and trust Him to make all things well. So is it well with you? Is the world being increasingly crucified to your hearts? Is Jesus Christ and his will increasingly being exalted in your life? Are you yourself increasingly decreasing in your own estimation? Are you becoming less self-centered and more Christ-centered? Are you poor in spirit, mourning, meek, hungering and thirsting after the righteousness of Christ? Is it well with you? If you were to die today, would your relatives gather around your casket and say, "It is well with our loved one's soul. It was well in his life. We could see the fruits of holy submission. And now he or she is delivered and is ever with the Lord only because of Jesus Christ." Christ, is he your life? Is he your holiness? Is it well with your soul?